As it's pretty obvious here from my channel, or if you follow me on social media, I spend a good amount of my money on technology that I enjoy. The reason I'm able to do this is because I have this YouTube channel. I have a different, larger, more successful YouTube channel where I create content in my native language. I also have a day job still. After all these years, I decided it was more responsible to keep the daily grind, because you never know what's gonna happen with this YouTube thing, right? All that work keeps me constantly busy. It's the reason I don't upload videos here as often as I would like. But on the flip side, I'm able to afford the nice things that I enjoy. That was not always the case. As you know, I'm an immigrant in Canada. I was originally born in Brazil, and in my first couple of years here in Canada, I didn't have much money at all. But I was still a fan of technology. So back then, my relationship with technology was much more different. I'm very privileged now that I do so much. I'm so busy that I can afford to go and buy the things that I enjoy. But back then, when I was completely broke, my relationship with technology was completely different. I would read reviews, I would look at pictures, I would see YouTube videos, I would see the random ad here and there, and I would just lust over those things that I couldn't afford. It's part of the reason why I have so many Game Boys, including some that I just put up on the wall. Because as a kid, my family could not afford a Game Boy, and I grew up completely obsessed with it. So much so, like, I'm not sure if you can, I have a Game Boy tattoo. That's commitment. But the Game Boy was just one of many tech toys that I wanted to have, but just couldn't afford. If you watch my show, I am certain that there's a lot of tech products that you want to buy, but just right now is not the right time. You are probably right now saving to buy some tech product that you like. In fact, that's what I want to know from you guys. I want you to tell me in the comments, what are you saving for right now? So I gather a bunch of my YouTube friends to talk to you about tech products that we wanted so badly but were out of our reach for some reason. In my case, the one that just comes to mind, aside from the Game Boy obviously, like wanting a Game Boy and not being able to afford one, being so broke my family couldn't afford a Game Boy, is my origin story as a content creator that focuses on tech. I swear to God. So you've heard the story many times. There are some other tech toys that I wanted that I never got to talk about. Like, for instance, the Palm Desire 72, released in 2004. It was a PDA, or a personal digital assistant. It was basically a proto smartphone. It had some of the features of a smartphone. It wasn't as easy to use, wasn't as mainstream, definitely not as affordable or as useful, but it fulfilled this fantasy that I had of having a pocket computer. I've always loved, I've been obsessed, in fact, with the idea of portability for as long as I can remember. Laptop computers, or Game Boys, like anything that's portable, has batteries, and you do stuff on it, you can press buttons and stuff. I was obsessed with that. And PDAs were really the closest thing we had to that at the time. I had a few PDAs. I was a Palm widower, I guess you could call it. I had the Palm Desire 21, I had the Palm TE2, or Tungsten E2, I had the Palm TX, or Tungsten X as it was called earlier before it was officially announced. But the one that I couldn't have, because like all the ones that I mentioned, I already had, like I started working here and everything, so I could afford those things. But there was one that existed in a period where I had no money, and then when I started to make money with YouTube and all these things, it was discontinued. It didn't exist anymore, so I couldn't buy it. The Palm Desire 72 was a standout among the Palm line of products because it was the only Palm Pilot that had a built-in camera. Now, Palm had some products that had cameras like the Trio line, their smartphones. But before the iPhone, smartphones were niche products that were focused specifically on the productivity crowd, like, somebody who reads a lot of emails on the go, something that, back in the early 2000s, wasn't something anybody was expected to be able to do, reading emails during your commute or anything like that. So PDAs were already a little expensive for most people. They were niche. Smartphones that had Palm OS, that were made by Palm, that were very similar to what the Desire 72 offered, but were also a phone on top of just being offline personal assistant, they were out of reach. So the Palm 72 exists in this gap of space and time where I wanted it so bad, and it's more affordable than, say, a Palm Treo, but I also had no money, so it being more affordable than something that's crazy expensive doesn't mean much when you're washing dishes for minimum wage. This thing, I even forgot. Okay, so check this out. Okay, it had a 1.2 megapixel camera, 32 megabytes of built-in storage, built-in Bluetooth, which wasn't so common for these portable devices at the time, so that was nice. A microphone, whatever. This thing, though it fulfilled that idea, like if I buy this, I'm going to have in my pocket a personal computer that I can take pictures with and I can talk to my friends if there's free Wi-Fi around, because obviously I didn't have a cell phone. Oh man, I wanted the thing so bad and I never could get one. I used it in store, like the display model you'd find at a Best Buy or something like that. I played around with it, I pressed the buttons, I was, you know, like you've done this, right? You go to a store and you have this product, there's something that you want to buy, but you just can't afford it, it's just out of your reach, and you just play with it and you imagine how you would adopt that device into your lifestyle. You think things like, oh, I could do this with that, I could do this would be so cool. Obviously, it wasn't in the cards for me back then because I didn't have any money. And now, I mean, I could buy one and do like the Game Boy thing with the Palm Desire, but I'm not as attached to the Palm as I was to the Game Boy. So also, it's a little pricier than I would expect for a defunct product that I can't really do that much with. And honestly, it's understandable when defunct old tech products show up on eBay for ridiculous markup, right? Because some of these things have sentimental attachment behind them. I don't think there's a huge market for Palm Desire 72 aficionados that would drop the prices that they're asking for them on eBay. So the world has decided that the Palm Desire 72 is going to be forever out of my reach, which is a bummer, right? Perhaps my fellow content creators, their stories have a happier ending than mine. Let's have a look.
Okay, so there's a lot of different tech that I've wanted over the years. You know, at one point I wanted a PlayStation, a Game Boy Micro for some reason, but the thing I remember wanting the most was a depowered Digivice from the season 3 of Digimon Tamers. Now, the main premise of this season of Digimon is that Digimon was an actual show that the characters watched, and then the digital world just ended up being real. So they were always playing with Digimon cards, and then the Digivices they end up getting, they can swipe their cards and add cool powers to their Digimon companions, and then they have the blue card. So this specific Digivice had the ability to connect to the internet, and you could battle across different regions. You could battle with real people, other people who had this, and you could just kind of go through all of these different Digimon in this virtual digital world. And I wanted one so bad, but because I was a stupid baby middle schooler, I could not get one. It did not release around one of my birthdays, and then by the time they exist, like, I don't know, I never ended up with one. I think my friend had one. We couldn't actually even get it to work online, so I don't know how good it was, but the premise was there, and I wanted one. So years later, I'm like 15 or 16, I've got a part-time job, and I try to track one of these things down. And I go through crazy lengths to get one brought in. I don't have a credit card. This was like not the days of ease of buying things online, especially not when you're like 15 or 16, but I finally find one, and I get it in, and it's not the one that connects to the internet. I don't even know if those servers would have been online because it would have been like 3 to 4 years at that point, but it wasn't the right one. It wasn't the one that it didn't feel as robust. It wasn't as fancy. I still have that one back at my parents' place, but it was a huge bummer. I never got one. I never got the experience. And now it's just something that has died in my heart, and Digivice have gone up to be hundreds, if not times thousands of dollars, especially if they're unopened. So that is my biggest childhood loss. If any of you had one, I hate you.
Izzy wants me to talk about a piece of technology from my youth that it was my white whale? No. Some term. Thing that I've always wanted but was never able to get. That, for me, was the Sega Nomad. Growing up, we had a Game Boy and we also had a Sega Game Gear, and I loved both of those. But the idea of being able to take those home console games with you wherever you are out and about was mind-blowing to me. At the time, it was a big deal to even have arcade quality games on a home console. So the ability to have home console games in a portable form factor was mind-blowing. And here we are in 2021. I'm a full-grown ass man and the Switch exists. Throughout the years, I've been buying old retro games and hardware that I didn't have growing up, but I've always wanted. And for whatever reason, the Sega Nomad never crossed my mind. I do have a video on my channel talking about the best portable retro stuff, and Izzy is actually in that video, and I talk about the Sega Nomad, and there's a little Sega Nomad section. But for whatever reason, I still never bought it. I think that they're kind of expensive right now, and it's also completely unnecessary. I got all of these stupid things I could play the games on. I got my Switch. It would just be a novelty thing and kind of an unwise investment. But it do be looking nice though. All right, fine. Let's check eBay. Let's see what eBay has to say. Yo, it's on Amazon for the low price of $2,499.
One piece of technology that I wish I owned but I never got my hands on was the original Game Boy. Yes, the original Game Boy, the big fat one with the green screen. Man, I loved that thing when I was a kid. I remember my friend, he actually brought one to school, and he knew how much I liked the Game Boy. So he brought it over and he gave it to me, and he let me hold on to it for a little bit. He let me play it, he let me put it in my pocket. You know, I was so excited. I couldn't believe it. So I felt so cool having that big, fat, green Game Boy bulging out of my pocket. It was so obvious, but I just was walking around thinking I was cool. And I remember it didn't have a battery cover or anything like that. And I think it had Mario on it. And it was fun. And then by the end of the day, he asked for it back, and reality struck, and I was back down to earth. I was like, okay, this is not actually mine. He was just letting me borrow it, and that sucked. The experience was amazing still, but it was bittersweet. And around that time, that's why the Game Boy was starting to pick up in popularity again. The original Game Boy Pocket Ice Blue was coming out, and it was such a cool marketing thing. I remember it's like burned in my brain. The Game Boy Pocket Ice Blue, and such a cool name for a color. I remember my friend James Pappas. I remember his full name. Yes, he was the very first person to ever get a Game Boy Pocket that I've met, and it was the Ice Blue version, and he was playing James Bond on it, right? James playing James Bond. And it was the RPG version of the game, I think. It was so cool. I was awestruck. I just couldn't believe what was going on in the screen. It was a nice contrasty black and white, and I just loved it because, I was always used to playing Tiger Electronics. That's what my family was able to afford, Tiger Electronics. Couldn't get a Game Boy at that time. Financials weren't right with my family, so obviously they couldn't afford it, so they couldn't put money into things like that. And as years gone by, finally, obviously the Game Boy Color came through. I've seen people come with that to class also, and that was something that I couldn't get my hands on either. Time went by, and then finally the financials with my family were really good, and we were able to afford, enough to get the Game Boy Advance. And that there was history. My life changed after that. Playing the Game Boy Advance with all the games and the nostalgia that I have filled my life to the brim with. My nostalgia is crazy right now because of all the great games and experiences I've had with the Game Boy Advance. Started buying more portables after that. I only imagine what could it have been and what could my nostalgia have been if I were able to get my hands on the original Game Boy. I can only imagine. I still to this day don't have one on in my collection, and I don't have my hands on one. And I haven't even gotten to try one since that day in class when I was a kid. Come to think of it, that's crazy. But yeah, hopefully someday I will be able to add that to my collection, and that's something I've always wanted and never got my hands on.
The weird thing about thinking about hardware that I've always wanted is that honestly, especially growing up, I never focused that hard on it. I know it's kind of become a main thing on my own channel, but really I've always been a sort of games first kind of person. I enjoy games, and whatever allows me to experience those the smoothest way possible is gonna be something that I enjoy. And so when I think about kind of hardware toys, I guess, stuff that I've really always wanted to grab, in particular, I think a lot about arcade cabinets. And not just necessarily regular stand-up cabs. I think there's a certain nostalgic love I definitely have for something like, say, a Street Fighter arcade cabinet, or maybe even like the Simpsons beat-em-up game. But what really stands out even more to me are those more interesting cabinets that leverage experiences that aren't necessarily recreatable on a regular home console. There's a couple different things that match this, of course, like different light gun games, rhythm games, for instance, but I think one that always really stands out to me, even though its control scheme isn't that crazy, but Virtual On. Growing up, I absolutely loved mech stuff. I was really into any kind of sci-fi mech feeling kind of thing. I played a lot of Mega Man, which I know, smaller scale, but you get the idea. Robots in general were super freaking cool. And so Virtual On to me was the absolutely coolest game I could play at an arcade if they had it. I didn't go to arcades very much, and so it was always this kind of really special thing when I was able to go to one, and that was one of the machines I'd always look for right away. Because the idea of having this mech fighting game thing where you actually sat down in a chair, again, didn't have necessarily specialized controls. It was for the most part a regular arcade setup, but just the fact that I had to sit down and the way that cabinet was designed felt like such a cool special experience that wasn't really replicated by just playing it at a home console. And so when I think of arcade cabs and stuff like that, that's something that I've never really been able to collect or get into or grab even now because, well, first off, that stuff's really expensive, especially the more specialty cabs if they're in good condition. But not only that, there's also just the management of where do I put this? And then there's that dangerous slippery slope of if you get one, maybe you get another, maybe you get a different kind of machine. It's a whole thing. I know people who are into arcade cabinet collection, and while it is super cool to me, I can't imagine how I would handle that for myself. And so that's one of those things where I have definitely wanted to do it, but because of the pricing and then also just the figuring out what to do with it once I get it, it has just remained outside of my grasp for now. But we'll see. Maybe someday I'll break down and that'll show up in the background of one of my sets. I don't know. I shouldn't do that, but I want to.
A tech product I've been lusting after for a long time would definitely be self-driving cars. And not just the self-driving cars, which I've had my eye on. Obviously, Tesla might be the forerunner. I think theirs are like driver assist right now. But what I really want is when they're like fully autonomous driving cars. I have like driving anxiety. I hate driving. I would love to do cross-country trips or go so many different places that I just don't now because I hate driving. I'm afraid of driving. It just causes me so much anxiety. When the technology in our vehicles makes it so these fully autonomous self-driving cars are available to us and at sort of at least affordable price, which I don't think I can afford it right now, and I don't think it's quite there yet anyway, so maybe I'll just keep lusting, keep saving for this. I think it would mean a lot more freedom for me and to be able to go to places that I've always wanted to go and haven't gone because I'm afraid to drive or whatnot. Yeah, it's really something to look forward to, in my opinion, and in my life, and I'm sure so many other people's lives, of what that technology can really do for us. Right now, I heard that Tesla has a full self-driving beta program that they're testing right now, and I think that they believe that by the end of this year, 2021, that they might have a fully autonomous car available. So excited that this technology is here partially and will be fully here soon. I think I've wanted a technology like this probably since I was little, maybe since watching the Jetsons or something, and sure, it's not like a spacecraft, but if it drives itself, that will lead to safer roads if I'm not in control of my vehicle. So, yeah, definitely that.
There's always been one limited edition games console that I've wanted for a very long time, and going back to the original Xbox days in 2002 when the Xbox officially launched, I wanted that console really badly. I was moving from like handheld gaming into console gaming, and after about 2 years after launch, my parents afforded to grab one for me, and it was the black edition. I was over the moon, but just 2 months after my parents bought that for me, this holy grail, this unicorn of an Xbox came out of nowhere, and that was the Crystal Xbox. It was a limited edition Xbox that basically celebrated the 2-year anniversary of the Xbox console launch. Now, there was nothing really special about this console. It just had a transparent crystal shell, and it came with 2 crystal controllers. And I remember it was really hard to get hold of in the UK. None of my friends had it, and I think eventually, like 6 months after launch, one of my good friend's friends managed to pick one up, and we went over his house and we looked at it and was like, oh my god, look at this thing. And it did nothing different, but I remember back then there was no way I could ask my parents for it. I was still like only 12 years old, so I couldn't really work. There was just no way of getting hold of it. And back then I think they launched about 500,000 units of this Crystal Xbox, which sounds a lot, but in the UK specifically they didn't have a lot of units available for the public, so it was really hard to get hold of. Eventually they bundled it with the likes of Fable and Crimson Skies, but that made the console even more expensive and even more limited, so I could never really get hold of that. But it wasn't until a couple of years ago that I went to a retro gaming expo here in the UK where I saw one for £40, and I just had to pick it up. And it was a bargain. This £40 was just for the Xbox. There was no crystal packaging, no crystal controllers, but yet I'm still very happy that I managed to get hold of this crystal Xbox. Still, I have yet to save up and start collecting like the original box and the controllers, but still, back then, the crystal Xbox for me was like the holy grail of consoles. And that's when I started really getting into video games, the likes of Halo 2 going online and Fable. The storyline of that was incredible. So back then, that was like, for me, the pinnacle console. Unfortunately, I managed to pick it up. So for me, the Crystal Xbox is still my go-to holy grail console of all time.
Anyway, I want to thank my friends for doing this video with me, and I also want to apologize to them for taking so long to finally putting this together, because they've sent me these videos weeks ago, but as I mentioned in the beginning, I'm a super busy guy, and sometimes it's hard to manage my time and do things in a timely fashion. But I miss talking to you guys about technology so much, I'm going to make an effort to be more present here and in my social media, where I'm there every day, because it's a little easier to put content out on Twitter or Instagram. Speaking of which, you should follow me on both Twitter and Instagram. Follow these people here too. All their links are going to be down in the description in case you don't know them, but I suspect that if you know my channel, you probably know a lot of these people. Anyway, that's all the time I have for today. I'm Izzy, and I'm done. And that got me thinking. I know that there's a lot of people, if you watch my... How did I screw up the pronunciation of the word show? I've been living here for almost 20 years. That's embarrassing.